The Great Canadian Talk Show.
There's only a couple of watts, but I brought the truth to everyone within 3 blocks of the west side of campus.
No way! Yes way!
And now, let's get right down to business with Marty Gold.
Welcome to the Great Canadian Talk Show podcast. I'm Marty Gold with my co-host Bearded Kenny. Season 2 rolls merrily along, and as Kenny described it, lucky episode number 13.
It is lucky number 13.
And
there are no unlucky numbers.
There aren't?
No. That's a lie. Perpetrated by mainstream media to make people buy lottery tickets, we'll say. How about that?
Kenny, is that fake news?
That could be a lie. Yeah, that could be a lie.
Be a lie. Okay. It could be. How'd your week go, Kenny?
My week went really well. Pretty good, actually.
We had great reaction to last week's episode, and I want to thank everybody off the top for the comments. We got actually a clarification, not a correction, but a clarification on one of our main issues that we tackled last week that touched on both civic and provincial politics here in Winnipeg and Manitoba. And right off the top, your feedback always welcome, martygoldlive@gmail.com. And as well, I know that it was pretty active online, Kenny, in terms of circulating the stories and being on Twitter. And, we're lucky we've got good material with what goes on in the hometown, whether it's in the hometown newspapers at City Hall or the legislature. And we're going to be continuing with more of the same in this episode. Again, some of these issues that walk on both sides of the street. That is to say, some of them are Main Street issues, some are Broadway issues, as we put it, the difference between City Hall and the province. But politically, many of these issues are married at the hip, and we're going to be talking about those. Crime Court's public safety update in the last segment. If I may, I want to make mention of something that's personal to me, but that touches on the community at large. I know that some people that listen to the podcast, they don't quite understand how I end up spending my entire adult life in and around the professional wrestling industry. They understand perhaps the sportscasting side of it when I did play-by-play, but the gradually getting more involved and taking on all roles, including refereeing, managing, wrestling out of both sides of the fence, being cheered and booed and whatever over a period of a number of years, and they don't necessarily understand the appeal of being around it. There are aspects of every industry, of every business, every sport that are not actually appealing, and that where people feel they should be doing something else. But one thing about the wrestling industry and the wrestling industry in Manitoba is that there are some very decent people that you could see really sort of don't belong, but we're lucky that they come into the business and they make it a better place. An example is best. That example is best illustrated by the life and impact of Terrance Machalek. Terrance is, for those who grew up on AWA wrestling, if you'd walk in and you'd see the arena matches that would come on, and there'd be sometimes a bald guy, other times a guy in a toque, which was Terry covering his bald head, his bald pate, that would reflect these strong arena lights. And he took iconic photos of all the stars that we grew up watching as kids, whether it was the Crusher, Billy Robinson, Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, the High Flyers, of course, Blackjack Lanza, through the Hulk Hogan era in the 80s, Ricky Martel. Terrance Machalek took pictures. If you ever bought a button with an AWA or saw somebody wearing an AWA button with the stars of that era, that is a picture. I don't know that any of them were not Terry's photography. He was very famous as a wrestling photographer, but he wasn't he wasn't a corporate guy. He was a down-to-earth fellow. I don't want to belabor, go into this too deeply. I think I'm going to do a separate podcast about Terry. He passed away this weekend. I had caught on that he was not well a few months ago, the last time I saw him. This is a guy that, especially in the last few years, and I'm very thankful for it, would come out to the shows, never asked for anything, took great pictures of all of us at ringside, from ringside, had encouraging words in the locker room. He and I go back to when I was first got around the wrestling industry. He took all our promo pictures in the 1980s, and not so much for myself, but other guys. They got booked because they look good in those pictures, and he explained to us how to pose and the formula for how many blown shots there was going to be on a roll of 36. The answer is almost all of them. Terry was a personal friend that would stayed in touch over the years as I drifted in and out of the wrestling business. He followed the work that we did on Kick FM. In 2016, when the subject of reopening Portage and Main was floated as a trial balloon, Terry, he had strong opinions, but he wasn't exactly really, computer adept, technology adept. And he was pretty good with Facebook, and he made a number of comments. Anyone, and this was like capital letters stuff, anyone and everyone who's not old enough to have crossed Portage and Main and was open should keep their mouths shut. Bowman and everyone else pushing for the reopening should talk to those of us who were there then. So he was a Winnipeg guy, a North End guy, one of the first families that was of mixed heritage, he being a Ukrainian Catholic, and his wife being an early immigrant from the Philippines. So they were even, how do I put this? They were pioneers in a way. He was very active in the community, a board member at Clinic, a shop steward. He was event coordinator in his retirement of the Canadian Press Pensioners Organization. There's lots of stories I can tell. So I knew Terry, he wasn't in the wrestling business. He was broken in, got around it because Al Tomko opened the door and Al let him be a manager for a while. And I think Al was kind of ribbing Terry a little bit, putting him on 2,500 calorie milkshakes to see how bloated he could get, this little 5'5" guy. And Terry had strong opinions about promoters and wrestling promoters. He wasn't crazy about all of them, but he was respectful. He took great pictures. His pictures, I said, they were used online. Slam Wrestling has used them, and previously all the wrestling magazines, and pictures of all the stars. I got to tag around along with him for a couple of misadventures. He was always welcome in the locker room in the last few years. His daughter entered the wrestling business around the time that I was actually on the West Coast. So I think I was at one show that I saw Nat working, I guess. But she had done some ring announcing early on. Actually, towards the end of the 90s, and so Natasha and Terrance Jr., when they were kids, they'd come over to my place, and when we were shooting these promo pics, because I live in Portage Place, in a nice place for once, and he'd bring his kids over, and our girlfriends would take them swimming, and they've been family to me. I know his grandchildren, so it's very personal. He was a unique, character, not somebody who would ever be on camera or in front of a microphone. But he was astute. He gave me excellent advice, both in terms of broadcasting, in terms of the journalism I did, very encouraging at all times. I used to joke with him that he was, as my mentor Yorm used to say, but this time you'd mean it. He was a friend of the Jewish people. Growing up in the old time Winnipeg. I'm going to do a separate podcast about him and the impact he made and how his memory is going to live forever with the magnificent photographs. And I was very fortunate. I'll close just by mentioning this, that because in the last few years, the invention of phone cameras, I did something you couldn't have done in the old days. You're ring announcing, you're holding a microphone in one hand, you're going to start taking pictures of the ring, and that's ridiculous. But nowadays you can kind of get away with when the wrestlers are jawing at ringside as they come out with the more elaborate entrances instead of the guys already just coming to the ring and you introduce them from there. I get away with taking shots of guys that are circling the ring and the crowd shots, then standing 20, 25 feet away, taking pictures I would have of the action. And so whereas Terry's taking pictures of the action, I'm taking pictures of Terry taking pictures of the action. So I actually have a lot of pictures of Terry Machalek at different venues, Canadians, in Garden City, for instance, the Holy Eucharist Parish Hall where CWE has been. Now Lilac Resort, a few really nice pictures of, again, it sounds weird to say, Terry Machalek taking pictures, but when Terry Machalek was taking your picture, you were getting your picture taken by the best wrestling photographer in the country, and respected universally as one of the best. He understood, I learned from him. If anybody likes my pictures, I learned from Terry. Try to frame a shot and how to get good sequences of shots or whatever. And not just on behalf of myself, certainly in this instance, I can speak on behalf of Canadian Wrestling's elite, the locker room and the staff, and on behalf of our fans, express our deepest condolences to Winnie, to his wife of it's almost 50 years, and to Terrance Jr., and of course to Natalie, and I know the grandchildren, and I expect I'll be seeing them in the near future. And Terry is very much going to be missed by everybody that knew him, because even at his most, there are times he could be cranky and critical, right? Especially as he got older, and didn't quite get the younger generation and their short attention spans. And I'm a grandfather too, so I get it. And Terry, in his worst moments, would always find the good in something or someone, and always have a good word at the end. And he was such a truly decent guy, and did his best to contribute to the community, and to do everything he could to be a good father and a good grandfather. And they love to travel, and he's going to leave a lot of wonderful memories for his children and for his grandchildren, the rest of the family. And our deepest condolences on behalf of CWE, on behalf of the Great Canadian Talk Show. And Terry will never be forgotten, and we're always going to do what we can to honor his memory. Kenny, I don't think you ever met Terry. When you came to that show, I think was actually the first one that he missed.
Oh yeah? Huh.
Yeah, right. You were at the Rumble?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
I think the last pictures I have of him are from the show before that, I think. You might have seen him at some of the other shows you've been at, but you wouldn't have met him or anything.
Yeah.
But again, as I mentioned in that soliloquy, if I can call it that, a lot of fans, they recognize, oh, that's the guy at ringside. And, people thought he was on the inside of the business, and he wasn't. He never had any, he never contributed to a storyline. He never got involved in a finish. His ball didn't blow in somebody's face. They did that with Yokozuna and Hulk Hogan once.
Oh, man.
And, he didn't like that. He didn't really like that idea either. Because any idiot thinks he can rig a light bulb to blow up, and somebody's going to get hurt out there where they don't have the money Vince McMahon had to spend on a props master.
Well, the wrestling community is so tight in Manitoba and Winnipeg, from what I've seen. They're definitely going to know that a major part is missing.
Yeah, it's so I just hope people understand, when it comes up, and why it's been a key part of my life and my travels, and being able to open doors. One of the reasons is you end up meeting people like Terry. It's like a totally normal human being, didn't drink, didn't do drugs. We're talking today. Did he even smoke? I don't remember that he was a smoker. He's just a hard-working union railroad, CP railroad guy that raised his family in and around Garden City, lived on Jefferson, and then moved further out towards the city limits.
Oh, wow.
And anyways, as I said, not I don't want to belabor the point, but you'd be surprised how nice some people in the wrestling business are. As much as you're not surprised how nice some people may not be, you'd be surprised how nice some of those people are. And Terry Machalek was one of the nice guys. And it was there's a Slam Wrestling story about him that I'll put the link up. I was able to contribute to it. Greg Oliver asked me to fill in some of the gaps, and I did that research, and I was very glad to do so. And I'll have more about the life and times of Terry Machalek, Winnipeg photographer, wrestling writer, wrestling photographer, and a family man. I'll have more about Terry in a special edition, probably is what it's going to turn into, a special segment of the Great Canadian Talk Show. Now, moving onwards by moving backwards. We talked about the new ticket gate for the modern era. The previous ticket gate involved Dave Chomiak and the NDP around 2008. Last week we talked about the inflated speeding tickets that were handed out by the government of Manitoba, a lawsuit alleging over a 4-year period, although the period was clearly longer. This is focused. The case, I presume, is easier to argue in court, doesn't collapse under its own weight. That the tickets were calculating the first 10 kilometers per hour over the speed limit when the original concept was to admit that there was a potential variance, which is probably more like 7 kilometers, 8 kilometers, and they had a 10-kilometer buffer, and then they fine you starting kilometer 11, right? So you're going 61 to 50, you'd get a fine for one of those kilometers, and they were fining you for all 11. So everybody's ticket to start with was $77 over what it should have been, plus other percentages. Well, we got some of it wrong and have heard from somebody knowledgeable in this matter. Marty, a couple things to correct on your cover of the class action lawsuit. You had the 45% and 25% backwards. The 45% on the ticket is costs, and the 25% is a victim of crime surcharge. It's amazing, Kenny, when we got that backwards, which
Yeah.
then when we heard 45% for victims of crime, I mean, I might have thought that's kind of high, but we didn't argue it. We didn't
Not
argue
at all.
25% court costs, right?
No.
45% costs. And then on top of it, they charge everybody $77 too much. You're telling me that's not a racket? And that if anybody associated with the Manitoba government knew about this and did nothing to refund it, did nothing to stop it, they must lose their job. I'll say that right to Heather Stefanson's face. That's obscene.
Or at least answer some questions. I would like them to stick around so that it doesn't happen again. I don't need to see people fired. I need to see people not having this happen again.
That people are being ripped off for millions of dollars, and you don't think that person needs to be fired?
Yeah, I don't think they should take the easy way out. Take responsibility for their job.
Now, that wasn't all. There's also the $50 court costs. So that was also, this goes to whether these tickets are legit, bogus, the cameras, the 4-second amber light trap that they deliberately set on streets like Bishop Grannon and made it dangerous and not only profiteered, but affected public safety quite deliberately. And I'll say it here and now, what passes for regulation of the engineering industry profession in this province is a joke, sorely lacking. The Conservatives have gone along with it for years. Somebody should show some spine and some backbone and straighten that industry, that profession out, self-regulated to the point where the public is endangered on a regular basis and nobody's ever held accountable. So here you have that going on from the engineering side of things, and the province profiteering along with it, and the city. So the 45% costs, the 25% victim surcharge, the $50 court costs, all three of those stay with the province. The city only gets the $7.70 portion of the per kilometer charge. However, as I think we may not have made clear last week, and is made clear here, that's double for designated construction zones. So that's $1,540 times 10. That's $154. Some people were overcharged. I'll repeat that number, $154. And
That's
then they're
outrageous.
charged 45%. So that's, just doing rough math here, folks, that's another 45 and about 20, 45 and 20, 65 and 154. You're already up to 220, I think. And then the victim of crime surcharge on $150, which is another 13. You're pushing, plus the 50, $300 ticket. And over half of it, well over half, 154 was bogus between period 2017 and 2021. Another large component, that's not all, Kenny. Another large component of the total refunds that will have to be considered is that this applies the entire province. We're only talking about the city here, right? Because
I sort of just had an idea pop in my head, Marty.
Uh-huh.
How many people do you think maybe lost their license because they got a speeding ticket like this?
Holy shit. Nobody's even talked about that.
I mean,
Although, we're not arguing we're not arguing the speeding ticket, but you've raised an interesting point. Whether the fine amount factors into the perception of how much of a speeder they are psychologically, and they go, you just got fined $300, and before that you had a $250. Meanwhile, the fine should have been $110 and $120.
Yeah, or you try to plead on hardship because you can't pay the whole thing.
This is nauseating. RCMP and municipal police departments are using the same formula. And like the city of Winnipeg, they issue as many speed tickets as they can. So the best estimate, including the designated construction zone doubling and province-wide issuance, is approximately, are you sitting down, Spirit of Kenny?
I am, yes.
$150 million.
Holy mackerel. That's a lot of snow clearing money.
The city profiteered off this too, right?
Oh, 100%.
And then they tried last week to say that well, that's the province's problem. Oh God. So I appreciate very much getting the more accurate explanation. I don't want to say accurate information, although it is, but it's an accurate explanation. And this is one of the ways that in the realm of citizen journalism, and we proved this on radio over and over again, Kenny, that when you get that input from listeners and input from people with expertise that aren't necessarily in government, don't have a particular, particular reason for chiming in one way or the other, you are able to bring better and broader information to the community at large, and make sure that everybody knows what they should be knowing.
And you're upfront with correcting mistakes, unlike some media outlets.
That is, I don't know that we've ever had a problem. We would do it was.
I think we enjoy the conversation when we make mistakes.
We had specific segments to go back over things where we'd gotten corrections or something. And listen, especially when you're doing breaking stories, it stands to reason that there's times where you're going on the best information available at the time. And the difference between why we were more reliable than a lot of outlets was because A, we were spontaneous in the coverage. B, we came at it from a completely different point of view and not a mainstream media kind of point of view. We always tried to get third and fourth and fifth voices in on things that were from outside government as often as possible, as well as try to go to the source when warranted. And in this case, it just actually makes, like, now I'm more convinced than ever it's 150 mil. And how are the RCMP going to handle this? And why wait? It's a whole other question. Why would the RCMP have been doing the same thing? I guess the tickets are administered by Manitoba Justice, right?
Yeah.
So they write the ticket, they give it to the Justice Department. The Justice Department uses fake math.
Yeah, I guess so, right? Or were they writing it up? Were they directed to write it up?
No, wait a second. I mean, one of the reasons I don't want to say rusty. It's not like I get a lot of speeding tickets, and I don't even remember. I mean, I might not have had a speeding ticket from the RCMP in like 40 years here, right? Like,
yeah.
It's never been my thing to get speeding tickets. No, because I remember at least city cops, they'd write out a ticket and they'd show you how much you're going to be fined. So they were told. So the Department of now we got to go back and get more information on this story. Was the Department of Justice telling these departments, here's the calculator, and they gave them the wrong calculator?
Or are there two different calculations going on, whether it was done by one organization or another? That's even more questionable.
Well, there does seem
10% over on one area and 10% over in a different part of the province is two different amounts.
Yeah. How bad is it that you don't know that if you can trust anything that was done by the authorities in relation to these kinds of tickets?
You think they'd be pretty good at it. It's their job.
When you see yourself as a revenue collector and not as a public servant, this is what we get.
Yeah.
Swinging over towards in the direction of let's swing in the direction of 510 Main Street and City Hall, something I wouldn't usually put at the forefront of that coverage, but because it wanders into a field in which I'm going to say this, vastly more experience in terms of length of time in the field than anybody else at City Hall and damn near in the entire city. We're going to lead with this. Mayor Gillingham announced on Tuesday morning at the Manitoba Multi-Faith Council, I don't know if it was a breakfast, it was a morning event, Mayor Gillingham creating a new committee to address faith and cultural discrimination. Now, some of you that follow us online at TGCTS, the acronym for the Great Canadian Talk Show on Twitter, or in our Facebook group, over the course of the last couple of years, I certainly went after Mayor Bowman for his useless Human Rights Committee that could do nothing of its own initiative, can only have an agenda, as I understood it, that was put forward by Brian Bowman. So it's strictly window dressing. And now, with issues causing friction within our communities, Gillingham wants to address faith and cultural discrimination. Now, I thought that these kinds of things were already addressed by an organization he may have heard of called the Manitoba Human Rights Commission. I'm not quite sure how faith and cultural discrimination wouldn't be addressed by his Human Rights Committee unless he's planning to abolish it. And I've reached out to somebody in Mayor Gillingham's inner circle asking for more information. And so again, this is an example where we might be able to enhance it, correct it down the line. I'm just telling you what I see from being around this kind of stuff going back 40 years ago. More than 40 years ago. The new Faith and Cultural Liaison Committee will help the city pull together to deal with problems as they arise, Gillingham said. Now, that is attributing the ability to take action to this committee, not usually how city committees operate. Because to pull the city together, to help pull it together, isn't done with statements, flowery statements, although there might be that I'm reading this wrong. Maybe Scott Gillingham is foreseeing an activist faith and cultural discrimination committee. Now I quote, I think this was from the Free Press. I think it's from the CBC. Here's a quote from Mayor Scott Gillingham. When we see rises of Islamophobia, antisemitism, and other discrimination related to someone's faith or their culture, those are things that I certainly want to know about as mayor and work together to address those kinds of issues, Gillingham said in an interview following the announcement. Kenny, you're not involved in any of these faith culture fields. You're a certain kind of so-called white Canadian male. Can you tell me, when I read that statement from the mayor, how do you interpret faith and cultural discrimination with the rise of Islamophobia, antisemitism, and other discrimination related to someone's faith or their culture?
I mean, how does he relate it? I mean,
what does this mean?
I'm not really sure. He's a politician, Marty.
Those are the things I certainly want to know about as mayor. Kenny, I got someplace to go with this. Remind me to assign you an email, okay?
Okay.
He also hopes, Mayor Gillingham also hopes the committee will help with issues relating to getting newcomers settled in the city and address problems like homelessness. Look, not for nothing, and I know it happens, but how many immigrants in this city are homeless? I know it happens. And if there are some, it's safe to say that there are, through one means or another, people find themselves on the outs. How does a committee designed to pull the city together so that he knows about problems when they arise? Why would they tackle homelessness? Wouldn't they just refer people to the homelessness organizations that are already there? How are they going to add anything to the...
Well, if this board can solve racism, they could probably also solve homelessness too. This is going to be magic,
Kenny,
super smart board.
You just said racism, and you identify the problem in the problem he thinks he's addressing is racism. But the word race is nowhere in this story. And what I was saying about being online and things coming up, I've spoken for some time about how what the city needs, not Brian Bowman's stupid, goofy Human Rights Committee. I realize that they all think they're doing some good, but they aren't. And I say that as frankly as I said it about the race relations committees as it was undertaken by Mayor Norrie. But we gave them an idea, a program. Yarma Mizrahi is our leader, the Manitoba Intercultural Council, of a way to put together a meaningful race relations program. I made a speech about that I think we can actually, me and Dave Pinsky both appeared at City Hall trying to wake up Councillor Yanofsky to pay attention. They want to spend scads of dollars and in the end not solve anything. But the issue now is race relations, not faith and culture. I don't understand how he thinks this is a matter of faith and culture. How many churches are attacked in Winnipeg? That would be a faith and culture thing as he foresees it. He's talking about faith. How many? Thank God, not many. How many mosques attacked in Winnipeg? Not many. Other houses of worship. People being attacked because of their religion, somewhat. People more so being attacked because of racism, looking different, dressing different, supporting the state of Israel. How is his? So, Kenny, remember I said you need to send an email?
Okay.
I want you to send links to my stories about what happened between the University of Winnipeg Collegiate at the Rady Center with the Jewish high school Grey Academy basketball team. Send it to the mayor. Ask him to have his committee look into it. And let's see how this faith and cultural liaison will interpret the anti-Semitism that had nothing to do, as I understand it, with being Jewish and a lot more to do with the politics of anti-Zionism. The politics of seeing Jews as lesser, undeserving of their own country in the state of Israel, et cetera, et cetera. Like that incident wasn't because anybody was an Orthodox Jew on their way to shul. So I don't know, but if he thinks that he wants the city to pull together to deal with problems, well, we've seen that the two schools involved aren't dealing with it. I'll provide a link to my latest story this past week. The sports minister, Abi Khan, telling the J.ca story under my byline, that when he heard of it, of the initial incident, he immediately notified not only the Department of Education, but the Department of Justice, in case it rises to the level of whatever the junior varsity basketball team player or players, because they've all been smeared by the way it's been handled by the so-called adults in the room. The so-called educators more concerned with covering up for themselves and for the sport of basketball in this province.
So are you saying that Abi Khan knew about this event before the parents did?
Let me think for a second. The parents didn't know until they were called the night of the 15th. This happened on the 9th. The story got out. Yes, I think Abi would have known, the sports minister would have known about it before the parents did. That's right. Because the story went out, I think, the Thursday night. And some of the parents apparently didn't find out until the Saturday night. Yes.
Interesting.
Well, when the so-called community, when the community leaders fail to address things, is this committee going to step in? When they're going to say, no, we can't have he wants anti-Semitism dealt with. But the Winnipeg Board of Jewish Education, the Grey Academy of Jewish Education, the University of Winnipeg Collegiate, none of them want to have this anti-Semitism dealt with. Excellent. Maybe Mayor Gillingham has accidentally figured out something that will work. Although I would continue to maintain that what was really needed is not this, because we're not dealing with religious tensions of the Protestants and the Catholics coming over from Northern Ireland or something. We're dealing with a whole different dynamic, the new anti-Semitism. And with regards to Islamophobia, there's no real universal definition at which point you're not being Islamophobic if you're concerned about terrorist acts and support for terrorism and terror of civilian populations in the Middle East. So, anyways, Gillingham has yet to finalize who will be on the committee, but said members will be drawn from across the cultural and faith communities in the city. Well, you see, that also doesn't work. It doesn't work as cleanly as it wants. It's great for pandering for votes, I suppose. And again, looks good. And the mainstream media is too stupid to understand this. And none of them had involvement in this field like I did in the 1980s, picking literal shrapnel out of my hair, as was described in the One magazine story in that era. Picking more of these same community leaders that are already, if he picks a leader for the Jewish community and that person, he or she has this incident involving the U of W collegiate brought to them and they refuse to take it to the committee, that tells you right there that they cannot represent the Jewish community, that they represent, protecting the status quo. And you can have that same go on in any other community. We don't want that talked about. No, shush.
What are they going to solve first, homelessness or racism?
A comment from a listener when this was published online. Good for you, Scott. The tried and true response to a non-winnable political problem is to create a committee. But you've outdone yourself by adding an extra unsolvable problem of homelessness in your committee. Not a lot of people want to serve on this or be able to find consensus on this topic. I have asked his inner circle, just give me some insight about this. I'll revisit the topic. Scott Gillingham has, there's a well-worn path with Mayor Gillingham. He loves committees and he loves committees having meetings. It doesn't really accomplish a lot, but it creates this sense of community, and it actually just bogs the whole system down. It looks like activism, but it's actually a kind of pacifism. Yeah, you know what I mean. So here's one more committee that he strikes without any definition, launched it at to feed out, again, his base as a former pastor is a little bit the faith communities, probably more than a little bit. And I understand that and I respect that. But I don't think this is the approach that the city needs. I don't think what you need is an organization that's going to sit down, for one thing, sit down like we did in the 1980s with all the gangs. And we did that. Is this organization that not organization, committee, are they going to do it? And how are they going to do it? Because believe me, the warring gangs, although they may not all come from different cultural backgrounds, speak different languages, and have different notions about each other. That's a racism problem, a racial prejudice problem in some cases between those groups, and not based on like religion per se or based on faith per se. It just, it's like when the radio is not quite tuned in. I think that's what's happened with Scott Gillingham with this idea. Radio's not quite the tuner's not quite there yet.
Well, after they solve racism and homelessness, they could probably find out who Batman is.
Well, maybe the next problem they can solve is where to find the money to keep the bathrooms open, the public bathrooms.
Oh, that's a real problem, Marty. Come on. We're not dealing with real problems.
CBC reporting the 2 programs that provide access to public washrooms to people downtown could be cut back. They're going to cut back the hours. 20,000 visits since June the 3rd, according to this story, and it's open between 7:30 and 5:30. It's open. This whole thing is so stupid. I can't, Kenny. So they open public washrooms 10 hours a day between 7:30 and 5:30, 7 days a week. Businessmen's hours.
Well, yeah. That's what all the people who work from home use the washrooms downtown. They go downtown just to use them, then go back home. They commute to use the washrooms downtown, Marty.
It's going to be cut to 8 hours a day starting May 16th. The city had budgeted $200,000 annually, but use has exceeded expectations. In other words,
they need it.
This is misleading, and I don't know if it's the reporters misspoke or if the city did it. That's misleading. When it says use, you're going, well, they mean more water because the toilet's flushing more and the sink's being used more.
Or time.
It's not so much use. No, not time, because it's only open a set number of hours a day.
But time isn't how long people are using it, right? How many people are, how much it is occupied?
So they have less time to clean up. So it takes long. I'm not quite sure. I don't see how that affects anything. The water bill goes up. You have to clean it more, but that goes around to this question of the term use. That's not quite accurate. When you go way down, the friendly giant, you look way up, look way down.
Like
And
Ant-Man.
I'll call Rusty. And what does Rusty say? Here's the caption for this section of the story. Temporary washrooms increasingly negative. That's a quote. While the city report declared the permanent washroom facility a success, it was less enthusiastic. Oh, I see. 2 different washrooms.
What does that mean?
These because these are the permanent washrooms set up by Thunderbird House.
Right. But what does that increasingly negative mean? Like,
For the temporary washrooms, well, these are both actually negative. They're saying this is so successful, we have to cut back the hours. And the temporary washrooms is not successful. This was in and around downtown North End. Our experience, a quote from Cindy Fernandez, Director of Community Services. Our experience with the temporary washroom project has been increasingly negative, with only a handful of locations functioning well for a few months at a time. The project started with 7 washrooms. These are portables.
oh, the washrooms aren't working. That's what they mean.
Oh, they were working until they started with 7, but after several fires, there are now only 3 left.
Well, like you didn't know it was going to get lit on fire. It's downtown Winnipeg. There's going to be machete attacks in them. It's going to get lit on fire. It's going to be involved in a riot.
One of those fires happened in the washroom at the Crossways in Common Church on Furby. That's 222 Furby within the last few weeks. So the problem is violent individuals. The funny thing is, Kenny, and I'm just guessing, there's probably quite a few in these different neighborhoods. There's probably a few buildings that the city owns or leases. Why aren't they letting people in to use the washroom? Oh, because it would disturb the workplace and this and that and the other factor. So instead, just let the fires be set in the community. That makes sense. Outside the church. Brilliant. Now,
yeah, and then you can blame that on it not working properly. Well, someone set fire to it. We know that's going to happen. Like how hard it is to have people fix it. You know it's going to happen.
Well, if you have 7 and there's going to be fires, don't you actually need 9 so you have 2 in reserve all the time?
Or
just put out 5 and hold.
I saw a glamorous job, but maybe a washroom attendant.
Well, maybe the other factor here is that these are washrooms they're unsupervised sites. They're just like public portables for no real reason except they determine there's neighborhoods where they're needed by the homeless, the indigent, other people.
Yeah.
John Orlico isn't happy anyways. He wants another report prepared about it with some other ideas. The city may not continue with the program, and that didn't sit well with Orlico. That's what the story says. So some of this relates to housing, relates to mental health, it relates to people that just are too violent to be in society. If you're setting fires to a structure, you're too violent to be in society. I don't care whether it's because of mental illness, mischievousness, wanton destruction because you hate authority and hate the city. I don't care. You cannot be around the public. To normal people, I realize that lawyers and judges have other ideas, lawmakers. The province announcing.
Let me just make one point, Marty.
Sure.
If we actually, there's one building in all of Winnipeg that people care about more than any other building, and that's the Canada Life Center, right? And they're always cleaning it, they're always maintaining it, and they're always fixing it. If we would just put half the effort that they put into that building into these washrooms, which should be a mandatory service, the problem would be fixed.
Listen, people talk about the programs in other cities, and I'm not I'm not offhand familiar with how this does or doesn't compare with what they do in other places, whether it's Vancouver or Des Moines or Laredo, Texas. I have no idea. Here you're dealing with a few different factors, and the biggest factor is any cab driver, any bouncer, anyone will tell you, you're going to do what, and what do you think is going to happen? You're going to put washrooms out there? We had to watch the washrooms on Canada Day like hawks. We put out portables. So What do you think is going to happen? You just have one unit or two units out in the middle of Spence Street, well, and I'm not picking on these streets. I mean, this is a Dufferin. This is inevitable. And is there not other ways of trying to help deliver some of these services to relieve the need? And the other part is, if people are vandalizing it, don't tell me that anybody who was caught doing that.
It's not the washroom's fault that people vandalize them. That's the people that are there.
And it seems like there's been no focus on dealing with that part of the equation.
That's right.
Right? But I'm not saying I know an effective way or not.
Stand and have washroom police.
Well, we'll get to the bus. Yeah, we will. They're going to be called bus police, but they won't be called police. We'll get to that in a minute.
But you like, this is a basic service that we should be having. We should start taking this as like, we should have more pride in the project we have and realize that, oh, maybe we have the money to start a project, but we also need to have the money to maintain a project, and not just on a basic needs area, but also on a security and maintenance area too. We need to think beyond just starting projects. We need to have like maintenances now for it.
Anyways, this, as I said, it parallels with other issues that politicians are throwing lots of money at. Province throwing another $58 million to create 700 social housing spaces, which isn't quite true from what I read, because it looks like some of the money creates a space and other of the money just pays rent for you to find a place, and includes Brandon, which is good to see because the homeless shelter there is far overrun, as I understand it. This coming through the Families Minister Rochelle Squires, increasing the basic needs budget for people on employment income assistance and the index rates for rent assist. Still not going to keep up with what the market rents are. Training, shelter support, de-escalation of this and that. The focus is based on the knowledge shared by service providers, Indigenous leaders, and people with lived experience. Mayor Gillingham called the approach a proven successful model. Homelessness and addiction are two of the biggest issues facing Winnipeg today. The housing-first approach, combined with on-site wraparound services, can enhance quality of life and healthcare outcomes. Kenny, remember you saw earlier I sent you an audio clip to pull?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to be moving into that.
Okay.
In a minute. While Mayor Gillingham and the Families Minister Squires, while they think that this extra $57 million, which I think on top of another 70 something million that was already committed, it's 126 or something million total, for training and more money for rent, and I think 300 maybe new actual apartment living units, maybe. Not everybody's quite as jumping up and down with joy about this plan. Marion Willis, founder of St. Boniface Street Links, here's the news story, described her reaction to the announcement as cautiously rather optimistic. I'll try it again. Cautiously optimistic, but there's little addressing what she says are the root causes of homelessness. It was a blue sky kind of announcement, and I'd like to see what the plan looks like. Kenny, can you play that audio right now? This, I think, is from Global TV.
Yep. Here it goes.
This is Marion Willis, the founder and executive director of St. Boniface Street Links. Many, many years of experience with street-involved people, and through Moorburg House has proven that she has methods that do work in getting people back onto the straight and narrow and becoming productive, sober members of society. Let's hear from Marion Willis right now.
I was just really hoping that we'd hear a little bit more about mental health and addictions, a little bit more about, the violence in the city, an unprecedented homicide rate this past year, an unprecedented number of people 2 years in a row dying of opioid overdose deaths. I have every reason to believe that this year it's not going to improve. It may be another unprecedented record, right? So, for me, I look at that and I say, well, we've had a 7.5-year drug crisis now. That's actually what's wrong right across the country. You'll find that there's escalating numbers of people spiraling into homelessness. And it is because of that, right? And so I would like to see strategies focus a little bit more on addressing sort of that root cause and recognizing the level of post-pandemic stress that this province and probably every province across this country is faced with right now. That's why you're seeing, the increase in all those poor social stats.
And so you heard Marion Willis, who's fought with the system since the late 1980s, and look what she said was missing from this announcement. And again, this is politicians throwing around gazillions of dollars. The Conservatives, of course, going into an election year. At least they're spending money, and there is a need for more training. There's a need for more spaces. But this is all very bureaucrat heavy, these approaches, in my opinion. I think Marion Willis has a similar point of view. She talked about the violence in the city, the record homicide rates, the record opioid deaths. She heard nothing about how they're going to address that. And that, she says, is what drives homelessness. And she made a point you didn't hear in that audio clip, but further in that interview with Global, that, we see the medicine wheel here in the brochure, or the announcement, right? The brochure materials or whatever, the handouts. And that represents, from Indigenous culture, all 4 races. And she made the point that especially the post-pandemic stress, the addictions that send people into a spiral, that's not, how should I put this, Kenny? That's not a matter of faith and culture. And it's not a matter where it's, one particular segment of society affected by that. It's all segments. And the homelessness initiatives, and the Homelessness Winnipeg describes themselves as an Indigenous organization. And so Marion's saying that this has to be looked at to encompass everybody, and this specific focus on one segment of society is detrimental when the common causes, the common root causes, in many cases, the opioids leading to addiction, leading to losing your job, not being able to hold a job, leading to becoming homeless, that the drugs don't care if you're, the drugs don't care if you're Cree, they don't care if you're Irish, they don't care if you're from Africa, they don't care if you're from China, they don't care. Here, get hooked. Good luck. So she made some really important points that when they say we're going to get to the root causes, and they're always looked at as like social issues and colonization, all this other. No, that's not where it's at. That's what Marion is saying, and I agree with her, and I think that she makes a good point. All members of society have to be protected and encompassed by these new policies and by this spending, and by their own words. We see these politicians, again, instead of doing the right thing, they're it's like a radio tuner. They're a little off frequency there, I guess, because to actually tune in might, make somebody uncomfortable, because then you have to actually face what's going on in our community with fentanyl, which then leads you back to a zillion free needles and nobody worried about how they're being picked up. And one thing we've seen in Winnipeg, the more free needles you hand out, the more people seem to use them. We're not seeing evidence that whatever wraparound services are coming with free needle programs, that it's working. Where's the treatment? And that's something in which, at least I guess it's Pierre Poilievre has said, well, we believe in treatment. And when people talk about Portugal, the Portuguese model, well, guess what? Portugal's model wasn't like hand everybody drugs. It was, no, you're going to treatment. So Marion Willis, I don't know that she's a voice in the wilderness per se. I don't agree with Marion about everything. We've certainly had some animated conversation in the past, but I give credit to Global TV for putting her on and allowing her to give a contrary point of view, considering that people like Jason Whitford of End Homeless Winnipeg, it seems like what he's focused on as well, this is money that goes towards reconciliation. Like, well, it's like everybody's taking their piece of the action off the top, and what ends up actually going to resolving the root causes. And there's no question. And the violence, the fact she mentioned the violence, I give her credit, because the violence affects, there are people that become homeless or, in between and sleep rough, whatever, and they are very meek. There are some that, that can change if they get into substances or, go on a drinking binge or something. I know this firsthand from the hotel business, from the cab business and such things. But they aren't looking for trouble. The homeless people in St. Boniface are almost all non-violent, because they fled the violent homeless communities in especially a downtown area, Fort Rouge, the West End. Nobody ever talks about these nuances and what's going on out there. None of these government officials, I'm saying. Marion Willis does, and it's to her credit and to the credit of Global News that they gave her that time to say that this might be, you know, a little bit pie in the sky.
The Great Canadian Talk Show is brought to you by The Hive Hair Company. From classic to funky, the styles of your life are at The Hive, in the heart of the Osborne Village at 175 Osborne. Call 452-4483 or online, thehivehaircompany.com.
On CBC, final remark about our esteemed mayor, leaning on an analogy he said he often uses, Gillingham compared a one-person kayak in the Red River to a dragon boat fueled by a team. We need to be a dragon boat to tackle this.
Oh my God.
I'm not saying he doesn't say it, but I mean, he's never said it to me.
What about in the wintertime? What do we gotta do then?
Okay. Comment from a listener.
That's the first stupid thing I think I've heard him say, to be honest. I generally like him, but
listen, I don't want to dive into the budget today. Folks, it's been a difficult weekend, and there's more budget, city budget and stuff. And generally, we've had very little to say about Mary Gillingham. I mean, he hasn't screwed things up. We're going to do one more thing about City Hall here. But between this committee and not addressing what Marion said about how do you address the violence among the people that are homeless, that are committing violent acts, like, and listen, that is get them off the streets one way or the other. You've got to get them into a situation where they can't harm other people. And a lot of times this root cause of stuff is like, do we really want to turn into what we've seen happen in places like San Francisco, where the cities are just overwhelmed by violent derelicts?
But we can poop wherever we want. We don't need those, Marty. Yeah, we don't need those washrooms. We should turn to San Francisco.
Okay.
We don't need the washrooms.
One last thing. I'm Kenny. We're going pretty long here. It's just going to be the one segment today.
Yep.
I'm foregoing provincial politics as much as I'd like to get into ER deaths, the ER death, and my own experiences in watching what they did with Brian Sinclair. I'm waiting for them to say that they lost the chart is the bottom line on that one. And the free press attacking the government with absurd concepts that they never would attack the NDP with. And for all the talk in the free press, I'll just sort of bridge this way. For all talk in the free press about recruiting nurses and staffing shortage and everything else, the things that have affected it, the one thing the free press never mentions, one of the things that has affected staffing shortages in the healthcare system, vaccine mandates that in other jurisdictions have been reversed or revoked, people got their job, whatever. And here the free press never mentions it because that, of course, would go against their narrative. Anyways, since we're on the subject of violence and city things, free press story, big picture of Scott Gillingham striding past the tables at the Chamber of Commerce. Mayor tackles bus violence. And in his State of the City address, he named 5 routes that are going to be subject to a circulated working document that outlines their plan to establish a city peace officer unit for transit, $5 million set aside in the budget. Routes 11, 15, 16, 18, and 47. I know, it sounds like bingo. Now, which routes are those? It's like specifically, because people don't necessarily know route number. So 11 is Kildonan, down Portage Avenue, and then down Henderson Highway. The 15 is that Sergeant Mountain. 16 is, pretty good, eh? 16 the Osborne, Selkirk Osborne, I think. 18, going by memory here. 16 Selkirk Osborne, the 18. Do I win something if I get this right? The 47 is Region.
A copy of RetroPeg.
What was that?
You win a copy of RetroPeg.
I'll win a copy of RetroPeg. Yeah, exactly. So the Selkirk Osborne, the Mountain route, I'm blanking out on the 18. None of these are surprises. terms of the routes and where the problems are. The 47 is to some people. It goes from the end of Transcona, I mean the east end of Transcona, and I mean all the way at the east end of Transcona, all the way down Pembina Highway. And what do almost all these routes have in common, a number of them anyways, go through the Main Street Strip by City Hall, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
44% of assault and unruly passenger incidents between 2019 and October 2022 were on those 5 routes.
Hey, Marty.
Hey, Kenny.
How if we don't tell the criminals where the police are going to be? Seems like a very poor strategy. We're going to be focusing our criminal fighting on these bus routes.
Well,
just use a different bus route then. If they know that the exact change is, chances are they're going to be pretty good with what bus routes they can use.
Here's where I think you're both right and wrong, Kenny. Some of these people get on the bus. We know they aren't paying. I mean, it can go through a litany of complaints that I picked up this week online. But this is like they're getting on the bus where they live and where they're going to, right? Mm-hmm. To and from. So there is probably a criminal element that is looking to just cause trouble and vandalize and assault people. And you're right, though, those kind of, there's a cop on the Selkirk route now, so I guess I'm going to have to take a McPhillips, take a 33 McPhillips Maples.
That's right.
So I can see how this could just, in essence, change the problem or shift the problem.
Move it, shift it, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that point. Yeah, the other one, the 18th is North Main Cordon. So I was right. And we've heard that these troubles on the Cordon bus goes all the way up to Tuxedo, which also has a few lovely residents abusing the transit system from time to time, apparently. So you're right. But what's the details of the plan? And keep in mind, remember, Kenny, we talked on this podcast that there was how many bus drivers in January, a few podcasts ago, have been assaulted just this year, at least 18, 130 attacks on bus drivers in 2022. And this Free Press story, just to mention it, it brings up the life-threatening injury when the fellow was macheted at Ness Avenue and Mount Royal Road, leaves out how that's blocks from Gillingham's home.
And he does like to take the bus.
He made a point of taking the bus, as a matter of fact, on November 9th. Gillingham takes bus to work, commits to address safety issues November 9th. This is a crisis, reported CTV News. Peace officers on transit bus discussing with Winnipeg Mayor and Justice Minister November 9th. December, January, February, November, December, January, 90 days to get to the stage where there's some sort of a working paper and they can start time on, and this might be enacted by the end of the year. For a crisis, that system sure doesn't seem to respond very quickly. But there's legal issues, starting with Gillingham wanting limitations. He doesn't want them carrying guns.
Okay.
He doesn't. He wants them. He used a specific term here. They won't be armed but trained in de-escalation. That's how CBC reported. I am specifically avoiding the use of the word transit security force. I won't call them that. They're a transit security team.
Is that weird? Is that really what he said?
He said, noting violent outbursts could mean someone is in need of other social supports. He switches out the word force for team.
Now, that's the dumbest thing he's ever said, not the Dragon Boat racing stuff. That sounds brilliant compared to that.
I guess in his mind, a force has guns. The union, Chris Scott, I think, is the ATU president. He said the union wants to see less lethal options rather than guns, such as tasers or pepper spray used.
Could they at least have machetes as well?
It would even up the odds.
I think so, right? Fight fire with fire.
They're going to discharge tasers inside buses?
Bear spray inside buses, Marty. That bus will be shut down for months while they try to clean it.
He also wants a security team. This is the union to be given the power to arrest, detain under provincial statutes, or one of the last major cities says doesn't have a peace officer program. Let me follow this.
We used to, at the Downtown Watch, when I was first there, we had special constable status, and we were allowed to detain. Well, they were allowed to detain people. So it sounds like they should have kept the Downtown Watch as it was and just transferred onto buses too. But they had to dissolve that because the problem was solved.
CBC quoting Kathy Harapiak, a transit user. She said stronger measures are needed. It should be police officers. Some of the buses are pretty bad on some of the routes. People on drugs in the morning and afternoon, belligerent people. It's not safe. The bus drivers can't even enforce the bus fares, never mind security, making sure their riders are safe. So the flip side of the coin, where you go, oh, we're not going to call it a force, we're going to call it a team. Where does it come from? It comes from the kind of people that get quoted in the media who are soft on crime and perhaps soft between the ears to some extent. If the city of Winnipeg decides to introduce, say, reduced or even free transit like some other cities have, you also reduce a lot of those problems as well. The more people on it, the more taking it, less confrontation with the bus drivers, with the people who can't afford it, a little bit of safety in numbers. What?
The second that you hear there's a machete attack on a bus like that, you're like, maybe I don't need to take that bus.
The more people on it, the more people taking it. That just makes more potential victims, in my estimation.
Yeah, they're like, why can't we use some police officers right now until we can transfer it over to the security team?
I think because it's not legal for them to be on the bus. I think that becomes a provincial thing. It's all the province funds policing, but it doesn't fund policing. Police on policemen and women on buses. It'll be challenging to find a functional transit Winnipeg. Kyle Owens, challenging to find them all. Leave all transit users comfortable riding the bus. What helps some people feel safe can cause feelings of vulnerability for others, he said. Oh, this is why Gillingham uses team instead of force. This is because they're worried about people's feelings, just like the library, and we all saw how that turned out.
Why don't we just call them the Transit Avengers then?
I might have to ask the mayor's office that. Are they going to have a special name, or are they going to be called the Transit Event? How bad is it? How bad is it? Gillingham's also talked about the potential for call buttons on buses as well as video cameras. He was finance chair for most of the last 8 years. He didn't fund call buttons on buses? Oh, yeah, that's right, because they wouldn't even buy them proper radios. This one commenter online said this all seemed to escalate when people were allowed to ride for free, and it seems to be the same trend across the country. What about everyone else? What about our safety? Not sure if security is going to be doing much either with how many violent attacks are done within spitting distance of police headquarters. Now, here's an incident that happened on the 60. They're at Confusion Corner waiting for a bus, okay?
Okay.
Waiting for the 60 after getting off the 16, one of those great routes. So here's a transit point involving the 16, which would then keep going straight up, up Osborne, Dakota like that. One of them, there are a couple of people sitting inside the bus shack. It says having fire. They made a fire inside the bus shack. One of them came out asking for a smoke. I don't smoke. I said, no, they tried to snatch my phone and purse. No one helped me out. This is at 8:50 p.m. Luckily, there was a bus driver coming toward me, and he started shouting, hey, buddy, leave the girl alone. Cops are on the way. He repeated his words very loudly. Thank God. That guy left me in a very threatened way. It sounds judgmental, but sometimes it's absolutely obvious who the self-entitled ones are, meaning the people who get on but don't pay. I just feel for the ones who pay $100 plus a month for a pass. See how much a bus pass is now? $100 and are struggling, yet the druggies get on and urinate on the seats, just my point of view. Now a story about someone. A young lady. Last summer, there was 4 passengers got on the 47 on Regent. And we all remember the stories. Again, we covered on the podcast, I think during the civic election campaign, about the bus shack outside of Kildonan Place on Regent. So what they did was the first guy gets on, he points the person behind him, they point the person behind them, and the fourth person goes, I'm not paying. 4 people walk on the bus for free.
And of course the bus driver stopped and told them to get off right away, right? And insulted them.
Well, sure they did. Every morning you see cleaning crews of the bus shack in front of City Hall. Mayor Bowman did nothing. Gillingham was at his right hand. Paying passengers in Winnipeg would rather freeze than sit inside these dangerous, smelly, filthy bus shacks. And then also this week, just to end on this, apparently some drivers were telling people, don't bother buying bus fare anymore. In other words, don't buy a Pego card, which is a hint that they think that they may be going on strike. 150 bus drivers have left the profession. I think that's in the last year. Might just be for 2022 to get the 150. And I hear it from anybody I know who takes the bus. What a miserable every day. Somebody's got a justifiable complaint. No, the windows, it's too cold, or he missed my stop, which happens, but like real complaints. Smells, it's filthy. It's
dangerous.
It's dangerous. There's derelicts getting on the bus. There's derelicts around the bus stops. Well, I guess we'll see how Mayor Gillingham envisions his crack security team is going to deal with it.
In a year, Marty. In a year, not.
Yes, by the end of the year. Yeah, big comfort to everybody who's suffering now. Kenny, one other thing.
Okay.
The March 1st in the afternoon, Fort and Graham cops attended. There's 4 adult males had been assaulted. They're between 19 and 23, so they're all young men. Okay. A 22-year-old was charged with assault times 3 and ACBH, assault caused bodily harm. One of the victims, a 20-year-old, was knocked out and lost a tooth, taken to the hospital. This clown fled on foot. He was followed to Main and St. Mary Avenue.
One guy beat up 4 people.
Well, but no, he individually picked off 4 people downtown. It doesn't sound like there was an argument between one guy and 4 guys, and he happened to be a better fighter.
Oh, okay.
The suspect randomly approached the victims and physically attacked them without provocation. Knew none of them. 22-year-old, assault times 3, knocked somebody out, knocked out their tooth, could have killed them if they hit their head on the cement. Released on an undertaking, as mandated by the criminal code. I'm just wondering, are we going to find out if he took a bus to get downtown? If he got people as they waited for buses? Just waiting to hear that part to see if that shoe drops on this story or not. Just waiting. Just saying. Item last, because I'm sure we've done enough. All in one float this week, and skipping up most of the provincial stuff. And comment from a listener, a loyal listener, he who ran for city council in St. James, narrowly losing the race to a former city councilor, Kelly Ryback, sent me a comment that makes an interesting point. And again, this is about downtown and how your tax dollars are spent. And 2 years have passed since Center Venture and Downtown Winnipeg Biz began working on a $100,000 report, he says, for the post-COVID downtown strategy. It was painful to watch the update process as city councilors grew frustrated with the lack of detail and action. I should mention that Kelly, following in where my footsteps were in the early and mid 1980s into the 90s, he goes to City Hall regularly, makes presentations to city committees, and sits in, and it does yeoman's work on behalf of the public in the modern era. A throwback to the old days when people kept an eye on City Hall. The federal government, he wrote me, announced $2.5 million for downtown revitalization last year. Almost half it was for a bike lane and a park at Red River College. Yeah, that's the ticket, he says. The yardsticks haven't moved. The problems worsen. Too much activity with no action. Beginning to understand why 61.5% of people don't vote. Well, it's part of the purpose of the Great Canadian Talk Show. To bring you the information, to get you fired up, to make you want to be involved, to make you send an email to your counselor, to your school trustee, to your MLA, to your premier, to your mayor, to your prime minister, for all I care, and we'll get to federal politics one of these days soon. Amazing. We've committed $2.5 million for downtown revitalization. Now, what if they'd have taken the bike lane money in that park outside? Because Red River College could have easily panhandled for dollars among their donors and paid for that park. Guarantee you they could have. Guarantee you. And they'd have put that $2.5 million towards, I don't know, downtown transit safety. Clean up downtown, clean up the buses that go through that. Hey, you think we would have gotten a bang for our buck that way? Instead, we get to wait another year.
Well, you see, the students at Red River College are usually there for maybe 1 or 2 years, or like 6 months over 5 years. Yeah. So they wouldn't really get to see value for, hiring a security guard for a year down the line. That really doesn't make sense. But a park, I mean, yeah, that's like instant gratification. Some trees and stuff. Cool.
Well, sure. First of all, cut off another roadway that goes east and west between Main Street and Salter, because God knows you don't need people to be able to go east and west through downtown. I realize it doesn't go from Main Street, it goes from Princess, but you get the idea. Yeah, I mean, just sure. Beautification.
Well, it's safer than transit.
Can you imagine if we accept that statement as true? Can you imagine that, though? That a park at Elgin and Princess is safer than transit?
I know it's crazy, but it's true because you don't hear about people getting chopped up and murdered in that park.
Well, well, there's security. There's always been good security at Red River College.
I
agree.
Lights out.
Amazing. No, but look at what you're saying, Kenny. The comp shop used to be across the street. Now there's no comp shop at park, and it's safer than the area downtown around the comp shop.
That's right.
We're going to keep shedding light on these subjects, keep holding our elected officials to account, keep an eye on your tax dollars. And it's all done because this is the commitment that we made, that I made many years ago, and then people over the course of a period of time through Kick FM, Shaw TV, other places, have gotten into the field of citizen journalism, worked on these projects, on this kind of news coverage analysis with me, like Spirited Kenny in the modern era. Here with the modern version of what's the best radio in Winnipeg, podcasting, the Great Canadian Talk Show style. Pitch time. You know what it's all about. If you value this, you want to see it continue, you want to help us build towards the provincial election, and we're going to be covering it. We're going to be asking questions. We're going to be getting interviews. We're going to be digging up stories. And there's a story I tried to get for this broadcast, wasn't able to. Apparently there's, I've been tipped off about another scandal involving the police headquarters and one of the contracts from when it was built. And I'm going to try to get those details, and that might be a midweek special if I can put that together. I know some of the facts, I know some of the rumors, and I'm trying to piece it together. Couldn't do it this weekend because of personal factors on both sides of the equation. I'm going to try to put that together. So you know what? We may not be done with the subject of Phil Schiegel yet either.
Oh, so pulling that name out from the past, eh?
If that doesn't make a contribution through PayPal worth it, I don't know what does. PayPal or email me, martygoldlive@gmail.com. We'll be back with more next week. I'll have a tribute to my dear friend, the wrestling writer and photographer, Terrance Machalek. More from City Hall. We'll try to get into some provincial coverage, and maybe Spirited Kenny will have a science story or something. Another one of his great science stories coming up.
Yeah, sure.
Boy, you're enthusiastic, Mr. Science.
Yeah, well, I always have tons of science stories. Well, this week was really just about the soot that fell in Maryland and
we have that
West
link.
Virginia.
One other thing before I forget.
Actually, there's a follow-up to that story. That's actually two different stories. There's two different ash falls.
Mm-hmm.
There's a soot fall that happened in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And then a couple days later, there's this ash fall that happened in Maryland and West Virginia. And the very next day, or no, it happened on Friday. And then on that Tuesday, they were able to collect samples. They released the results of the testing, and they're saying that's pollen. But everyone in that area has never seen ash fall like that before. So what is pollinating right now in that area?
Give with the links, and I'll try to fit it in this episode description because we ran those links. I want to mention also there's YouTube versions. You go to the Great Canadian Talk Show YouTube page. It's under my account, TGCTS. And we have YouTube versions of the episodes. They're cut up. So there's segments about, for instance, the ticket scam is a specific segment, crime courts and public safety, and lots of visuals, including visuals of, some relics from the past, news coverage involving me and other such people. But it's fun to watch along now. You can watch along with what we say here on the podcast, Great Canadian Talk Show podcast. We can continue.
Yeah, it is really good.
It's entertaining, eh?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And of course, your ideas, your concepts, your tips, always welcome. MartyGoldLive@gmail.com. Believe me, that's it from us. I'm in Saskatchewan next weekend, so the program will be in segment version next week. Kenny and I will slap it together, and so the week following there'll be more of this kind of rancorous discourse between old fogies. I guess you don't qualify as an old fogey, but perhaps I do now.
I feel like one sometimes.
And that's, you know what? And how you feel is all that counts. Just Just
Mind
ask
over
our
matter.
elected officials.
That's right.
Oh, you feel like an old fogey. Well, we wouldn't want to hurt your feelings, so I guess we'll just make the buses a little less safe. Oh, wait, you're an old fogey. You want the buses more safe. No, we're going to hurt your feelings because your feelings count less than the other people. See how that works, Kenny?
It's very bizarre. Very
We're going
bizarre.
to keep trying to make sense of it. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate your donations. We appreciate your contributions. We appreciate, and you want to advertise or sponsor segments or the program itself, please get a hold of me. And we're going to continue to grow this platform. We're going to continue to march on towards the provincial election, and we're going to tackle everything that comes in our path, and going to give it a good working over before we cast it aside, move on to the next challenge. And until then, remember, as always, you have the power.
Thanks for listening to The Great Canadian Talk Show. If you want to email Marty, send it to tgcts1@gmail.com or follow him on Twitter @TGCTS.